Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Karen Morton. I'm the Northeast Regional Director for the Republican Liberty Caucus of Northeast Florida. And we are here this afternoon to spend some time with our candidates for the United States Congress District 3 to replace Ted Yoho. This is going to be a rousing event, I'm sure. We've got a lot of good questions for everybody. But I did want to do introductions, and I want to let you know as well that we do have some candidates who are not here today. There are 10 candidates on your ballot for U.S. Congress. So you've got quite a choice to make, and it's worth some time to pay attention and listen to these candidates, find out what they're about, and decide who is going to be your representative. Not appearing today is, first of all, Todd Chase. And Todd Chase, his father-in-law passed away, and he is they're having military services for him today over in Tampa. So if you could please hold Mr. Chase and his wife and children and family in your prayers. Second is Judson Sapp. He will not be here. He had a full schedule and was not able to readjust. James St. George has decided not to participate, and Ryan Chamberlain has also decided not to participate. However, we got 6 good ones. First of all, Kat Kamek. Second is Amy Pope Wells. Third is Joe Dallas Mulatto. Fourth is Bill Engelbrecht. Fifth, Gavin Rollins. And sixth, David Theus. So we're thrilled to have them with us today. Like I said, listen up, because they're going to be talking about a lot of things here. Our moderator for this panel is a retired U.S. Navy captain. He is a former congressional candidate in District 4. And he also is the national spokesman for the We Can Be Heroes Foundation. Mr. Ryman Schoaf.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate that. Welcome to our candidates for this panel, this section. Let me just kind of lay over some ground rules so everyone's all on the same sheet of music. First of all, even though I'm the guy doing most of the talking when you're not talking, I'm just a moderator. I'm just asking questions. So I just ask that when you answer the questions, answer as if you're talking to the audience. The camera's in front of you. We've had candidates that every time I'd ask a question, they would just spend their time looking at me, and I'm not important here. It's the people that you're trying to convince to get them to vote for you. So if you just dress like the audience is here and look at the camera, I think that would be the best. Okay. As I move through the questions, I'll tell you how much time you have beforehand. It's either going to be 30 seconds, 1 minute, or 2 minutes to address the question. Just to make sure that you know how much time you have left. When you get 15 seconds left, you will get the 15-second sign. 15-second sign. Okay. When your time is up, we'll wave Old Glory at you. And if you feel the need to press pass Old Glory, you're going to get the dreaded cowbell. Okay. Since we have this many candidates, as we move through the questions, if we get to you and you want the question to be repeated, we are here for you. I'll repeat that question as many times as you want. Some of the questions have more than one part, so we want to make sure that you have ample time, that you understand the question so that you can answer it appropriately, okay? You all drew numbers, so Ms. Kamak, you'll be first. So what we'll do is we'll open up with a 2-minute opening, and then we'll go from the lowest number to the highest. When we do closing, we'll do it the opposite. Since you are beginning with the opening, you'll end with the closing. That way everybody is not doing the same number all the time. So that's how that will flow. So we'll do the 2-minute opening, and then we'll roll into the individual questions, and then into our closing. And Ms. Kamat, since you got number 1, you get to go first. The floor is yours, your 2-minute opening.
Thank you, Ryman, and thank you to the Republican Liberty Caucus for hosting today's forum. My name is Kat Kamak, and I am your constitutional conservative for Florida's 3rd District. I am a third-generation commercial sandblaster, the wife to a local first responder, a small business owner, a co-founder of a local nonprofit for first responders, and the longtime Deputy Chief of Staff to Congressman Ted Yoho. A few years ago, I also completed my master's degree from the United States Naval War College in National Defense and Strategic Studies. I am running because I believe that it's time for the next generation to take control of our country's future and stop this slide into socialism. I am running on an America First platform. And for me, that means standing with President Trump, building the wall, protecting the unborn, supporting term limit efforts, and cutting taxes, balancing our budget, and actually getting our national debt and deficit under control once and for all. I have been endorsed by Senator Rand Paul, the Republican Liberty Caucus, the Tea Party Express, Tea Party Patriots, and more locally in Clay County, I have been proud to have been endorsed by Clay County Chairman of the Commission, Gayward Henry, and Keystone Heights former mayor and current city councilman, Tony Brown. In addition to support from Florida Farm Bureau, farmers and ranchers around the district, as well as industry leaders, I am proud to have been supported by more local elected officials than any other candidate in this race. This race is about stopping the slide into socialism and getting our constitutional republic back. I believe as the youngest candidate on this panel here today and a millennial, I can stop AOC and the squad, and I appreciate your attention to today's forum, and thank you. Looking forward to a wonderful discussion.
Thank you. Mrs. Wells?
Thank you, Captain Schoaf, and thank you, Republican Liberty Caucus, for holding this event today. Hi, I'm Amy Pope Wells, and I'm running to be your next Congresswoman. Many of our local residents in Clay County and business owners and community leaderships in this area know me. The reason why we know each other is because I'm also a local business owner. I have been actively involved in this community for many, many years now. In addition to being a local business owner, filling hundreds of jobs per year, actually even hiring a lot of children of the families here in this community, you also know me through the Chamber of Commerce. That is where I have chaired the Chamber of Commerce and also the Foundation for Nonprofit Giving. I've been an active community volunteer, volunteering 40 to 60 hours per week for many years now. I've also worked on projects such as women's empowerment, economic development, small business advisory and mentoring, and fundraising for students and teachers for school supplies and scholarships annually. I'm here today for one simple reason. I've never been in politics before, but after experience and understanding the difficult challenges both elected and unelected officials face, under the request of President Donald Trump, I've spent time in Washington since 2017. I was chosen to work on policy solutions for healthcare, small business, and women and children. It's time we put experienced professional public servants in front of the challenges that each of these communities face. This community needs a voice and representation in Washington. Our world is on fire right now. We have more division than ever. China is trying to start a global war. It is time that we take the game of politics out of this process and elect someone to be the voice of the citizens of the community. My plan is to build a solid partnership and relationship for all the citizens of the community and provide great constituent service. Please, more than ever, let's put people over politics. Thank you.
Mr. Mulatto?
Thank you. My name is Joe Dallas Mulatto. I'm a conservative Republican running for Florida's 3rd Congressional District. I'm a small business owner, and I'm a proud American that is concerned with the direction that our nation is heading into. Now, I echo and agree with a lot of what our candidates and my fellow opponents are saying, that we need to send someone, an individual with the right heart, with the right credentials, right passion, to actually get the job done. I spent about 13 years chasing this American dream, and if you help me achieve and succeed in mine, I promise you, with every fiber in my body, that I would help you and your children achieve theirs. The direction that we're heading into needs a course correction. And there's many times in our nation's history when that was needed. It was necessary. All the good people, all the people that we respect that have moved and changed the history and the direction of our nation for the better, they didn't do it for a press release. They didn't do it when it benefited them. They stood up. They stood up and said things, and they did it with their actions. Evil and corruption exists only because good people stood by and did and said nothing. I spent 13 years, again, dedicated for this. Now, when I went to Washington, D.C., they tell you all sorts of things. And if you aren't experienced to know the truth versus the fake news, you are just going to repeat the cycle over again. Everybody told me, don't teach anybody what you know, because they're going to come gun for you. They're going to come after your position. I recognized what they say, and I said, I don't believe that. I taught everybody what I knew, because knowledge isn't power. The ability to teach knowledge is power. Go to mulattoforcongress.com. Again, I am the person, I am the individual with a heart, the qualifications where it matters. While everybody would ask you to kneel, we simply ask you to rise.
Thank you. Mr. Engelbrecht?
Good afternoon. That was pretty loud. First, I want to thank the Republican Liberty Caucus for hosting this forum today. My name is Bill Engelbrecht, and I'm an everyday American conservative Republican running for Congress. And I believe we need more everyday Americans in Washington, D.C. that understands the issues that middle-class Americans are struggling with. Too many times we elect officials or elected candidates with the most money and often out of touch with our constituents. So I am a candidate who started out in a vocational program in high school, moved to computer technology in college, and now I'm living the American dream, owning my own business and creating over 1,000 jobs within our district. So everyone on this stage is a conservative Republican. We all support President Trump. We're staunch defenders of the Second Amendment, and we all can't wait for the wall to be built in our southern borders. So I hope today's conversation that we have, that we're able to talk about the differences that we have. For example, there's two candidates that are running for this congressional seat are playing Michael Bloomberg. They put over $500,000 of their own money trying to buy this congressional seat. One of those candidates doesn't even live in our district. The other candidate was a registered Democrat in California. So they are not an everyday American. They are not like you and me. They will easily be consumed by the D.C. swamp. We have another candidate who wasn't part of the D.C. swamp for 7 years. So and they didn't even get the endorsement from their former boss. So you have to ask yourself why. My name is Bill Engelbrecht. I'm a conservative Republican, and I appreciate your vote on August 18th.
Mr. Rollins?
Hello. My name is Gavin Rollins, and if you look at the problems that our nation is facing, the challenges, we're facing the threat of communist China. We're facing the erosion of our history and our culture and what we as Americans, the freedoms that we hold dear. Free speech, religious freedom is under attack. In California, the governor tried to make it illegal to go to church. We're in a church right now. And I'll tell you this, if I have to go to jail for going to church, I'll gladly do so, and I'll continue the fight for this congressional seat from jail. And that's what we need in this. This isn't about any one of us up here. This is about you, the voters, and who you want to send to D.C. It's like a deployment. If you think about the support group that requires to send somebody to a deployed zone to fight on behalf of their nation, that's what you're doing. You're sending us to represent you in Washington, D.C. And let's face it, Washington has become a war zone. And it's a life and death fight for the soul of our nation. And the three arenas I've had the opportunity to serve in have equipped me for that fight. I've been a teacher teaching history, and so I will fight for and stand up for American history. I've been a county commissioner and fought for our values here locally. The Second Amendment stood up for life, voted for term limits and holding politicians accountable. And then I've also literally served and fought for our country overseas in a combat zone under President Trump. So if you give me the opportunity to deploy to Washington, D.C., I will continue that fight. And I will continue to fight alongside President Trump to keep our country the greatest country in the world, to keep religious freedom, free speech, and to fight back against the radical left, which is seeking to undermine and destroy the foundations of our nation. Thank you very much.
Mr. Theus?
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. My name is David Theus. I'm 56 years old. I'm a Christian. I'm married. I have 2 daughters and 5 grandchildren, and I'm a native Floridian. My work centers around cultivating professional relationships. My approach focuses on listening, asking questions, researching the issue, and working together to form viable working solutions. This is the same approach I'll be taking to Washington to serve you. I believe America is the single greatest country in the world. I stand for traditional American values. I will fight for the Second Amendment, our veterans, religious freedom, fiscal responsibility, and the rule of law. I believe in the right to life, limited government, and free enterprise. I view our freedom as a 3-legged stool: national security, energy independence, and a safe and affordable, readily available food supply. I will go to Washington and not forget who I serve. I'll do the work of all the people in a common sense approach. And I pledge to serve a term limit of 8 years and come home. My name is David Theus, like the U.S., and I'm asking for your vote on August 18th.
Okay, thank you. Now we will move into the question portion of our panel. If an individual decides to call out another member by name on something that they don't particularly care for, that is certainly your right. If you do, the individual that you call out will have 30 seconds to defend themselves. What we would ask is that we hope that you will take this time to convince the voters of why they should vote for you, and not take the time of why you're trying to convince the voters of why they shouldn't vote for someone else. This is your time to get them to convince the voters to vote for you. Ms. Kamak, you will have the very first question. You'll have 2 minutes to answer this question. The question is, since our current Congressman, Ted Yoho, is stepping down, we will have a new person in Washington, D.C., and this may be you. What will be your number one legislative priority, and what is your plan to get it moved since you're going to be a freshman?
So we have several legislative priorities that we're going to undertake on in the first quarter to get that ball rolling upon election, which we will assume office January 3rd of 2021. I have federal priorities that will advance legislatively, and then district-based priorities that we're looking to champion. Here in the district, rural broadband is a top priority for my campaign, my candidacy, and I've spent the last 7 years working on this issue, delivering rural broadband solutions across this district, whether it is Putnam County, the outskirts of Clay County, Alachua, Union, Bradford, Marion, and beyond. We have worked to deliver innovative solutions, whether it is through Microsoft's new technology and working with the FCC to get the regulatory process streamlined so that we can deploy this technology, or working to secure appropriations so that we can lay the infrastructure that is critical. I think COVID-19 has proven that the need for internet access in our district and across the country is more paramount than ever. So whether it is for commerce or education, we need to have access in our district and beyond when it comes to high-speed, reliable internet. Legislatively, there are several things that we need to tackle. The first thing that we need to do in the first week is a rules package in the 117th Congress. While it is not a headline grabber and it is not a quote-unquote sexy issue, it's important that we make some key tweaks. The Nancy Pelosi's of the world and the Democrats in the 116th, they rolled back key provisions that made government less accountable and transparent. We need to restore the 72-hour rule in order to vote on bills, we need to make it so that members sign legislation stating that they have read that bill, and we need to restore the supermajority in order to increase taxes. Those are rules packages right out the gate that we need to tackle. Thank you.
Mrs. Wells?
Yes, hi, I'm Amy. I have 3 priorities listed. There are many priorities on the list, but I think first and one of the most important ones is great constituent services need to be applied to this district. That starts with building a world-class team to be able to receive and intake calls to help the community. So it would start with the experience that I currently already have, which is building great jobs and teams. Strong staff to provide excellent customer service so that we ensure that all citizens' problems and concerns are at least heard and addressed and moved to the proper place. Previously in the past, I've been a victim of this in a lot of our government situations where staff were too busy to return my call. I understand, but it's not acceptable. This is not acceptable, so I will hold myself accountable to that to make sure we always are addressing these issues. Number 2, I will always vote a conservative ticket. I will assure you on the voting floor in the U.S. House that I will vote this ticket because we're all Republicans here and we should not to pretend if we're not. When not voting a conservative ticket, I would love to go throughout the community and help them build a vibrant community plan, that also of which I have a lot of experiences. I want to progressively work on the priorities of each of these communities and to helping them decide what's most important to them. Third, I will be addressing our healthcare issues, what I've already been doing for the last 3 years. I will be fighting to decrease regulation and also addressing what not needs to be kept, or not what needs to be cut, but what needs to be cut on the budget. See, healthcare, decreased regulation, community planning, and I live in a rural part of this community as well, and broadband and reliable internet service is a serious problem. Thank you.
Mr. Mulatto?
Within the first 100 days, as your member of Congress, we will have a substantive bill introduced in every major standing committee. I have the experience, I've already done it as a staffer working for former Congressman Cliff Stearns and Gus Bilirakis, 2 members on Energy and Commerce, and 2 former vice chairmen of the House Veterans Affairs Committee. So Veterans Affairs and veterans, our military, is one of my top priorities. One of the bills and measures I had proudly worked on, was addressing the 18 to 22 veterans committing suicide per day. Now, we have tons of issues, and there's lots of issues that keep coming up every day, new ones. But we need to address head-on and solve the problems that we've had for the last couple of decades. One of the bills that we introduced and is now a law is the COVER Act, creating options for veterans' expedited recovery, and the PROMISE Act, the Promoting Responsible Opioid Management and Incorporating Scientific Expertise Act. Now, these things sound great. It's a great acronym. It's a great bill. It does a lot of good things, but that stuff took work. It's an idea from concept, working it, getting stakeholders on board, public buy-in so the public and the veterans and their families have their input. Then you have to go get it through the House process, the Senate process, committee, and all those things. Then the appropriations process is the funding mechanism to it. So if any other individual has to relearn these things, that is time. When they say they're going to do these things in their first quarter, that's ridiculous. So it's having a good idea, it's having a blueprint ready to go, and not theories. Let's stop shooting in the dark here. I have proven abilities. I've already proven it with my resume with multitude of different issues. So sky's the limit. So it could be working on mental health for veterans. It could be the energy crisis. It could be the health crisis. No matter what it is, I tout that I could write that bill without a lobbyist, without special interests, how it should be. Thank you.
Mr. Engelbrecht?
Well, since being in the healthcare field for 32 years and a business owner of a healthcare company for 26 years, my priority would be the healthcare reform. We need to lower the prescription drugs. Now, currently, President Trump has signed 4 executive orders last week to help reduce the prescription drugs, but we still need to do more. We still have to ask the questions and answer the questions as to why foreign countries have lower healthcare costs than we do. The other one is to lower healthcare premiums. With these premiums here, I have an idea that how we can actually put money back into the individual. These big name insurers last year in 2019 alone profited over $35.7 billion. And now that's off the backs of every American in the United States. And we need to be able to bring some of that money back and put it into middle-class America, the people who are paying for these health care premiums. So at this point, lowering the health care premiums, what we can do is we can actually take 10% of the deductible and bring it back. If they don't use that premium, they can give it back to the employee. But we can get into more details about that later. The other priority is our senior citizens. When our senior citizens have to, at the end of the month, they have to ration out their medications, and they have to decide between their medications and their food, how much they eat. There's no reason why our senior citizens have to do that. Veterans. Our veterans, my brother came back from war. He was driving from Daytona Beach to Gainesville, passing many hospitals and doctors' offices in order to get treatment. There's no reason for that. So we need to have more access, more ability for our veterans to get the care that they need. That's what I would introduce. I would work on those things in the first 100 days, and I'd work in that committee in offering my expertise and my opinion of that. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Rollins.
So my colleagues have mentioned a lot of great priorities, and I don't think it has to be only one. I would roll up my sleeves and introduce like 20 bills day one in Congress. But one thing specifically that hasn't been mentioned on the stage and I would like to introduce is a bill I call the Adoptions Instead of Abortions Act. Right now, Planned Parenthood is getting funding from the federal government, and what I would like to do is take that funding from the evil corporation that is Planned Parenthood that wants the destruction of our unborn and shift that to adoption agencies at the state level. And this would affirm life. My family has been impacted by adoption, the miracle of adoption. My sister is Indian and adopted, and my nephew is also adopted. And adoption is a beautiful picture of life. And we need to return to a place in this country where we value life at every stage, from conception until natural death. As it says in Psalm 139, God knit us together in our mother's womb, and we need to value life in this country again. I think a lot of the challenges we face are because we've created a culture of death, and we need to create a culture of life where we value and affirm life. And that's what one of the things unique on this stage I would introduce is an Adoptions Instead of Abortions Act. And that's why I'm honored to be endorsed, the only candidate on this stage to be endorsed by the Florida Family Policy Council, Family Policy Action, because they know of my record on the life issue. And then I also have an A rating from Florida Right to Life, because I will stand strongly and be a fighter for the unborn and for life in Congress. Thank you.
And Mr. Theus.
Sir, if you could repeat the question, please.
Sure can. So since our current Congressman, Ted Yoho, is stepping down, you will be the new person in Washington, D.C. if you're elected. What will be your number one legislative priority, and what is your plan to get it moved since you're going to be a freshman?
Thank you. You know, anytime transition happens, whether it be in the private sector or public, there's tasks and jobs and hopes left behind. And so I believe it's real important. I've already been talking to the folks in the district to find out what Mr. Yoho has been involved in up till now, and the investments of time and sweat and energy from the local communities. And for example, Project Putnam has been on the table for quite a while, and it's important to the folks in Putnam County to see this through fruition. Bradford 100 Corridor is another initiative that's been started by the Bradford County Chamber of Commerce. I spoke at length with Pamela over there in Stark, and this is something that they're fearful that if Mr. Yoho leaves, it'll be forgotten and set aside. Even though it's not anywhere near fruition, it's been something that's been started. I know Clay County Economic Development folks. I've been talking with them quite a bit, and they're looking at the airport and how they develop it that straddles down by Keystone, or in Keystone, I should say, Clay County and Bradford County line. So anytime there's transition, I think it's real important to go back and assess what the previous administrator has left behind and assess those priorities and to make sure what's important that doesn't get left behind. The second thing is I'd like to do is reach out to fellow members. I would tell my team immediately to go out to fellow members in the Congress and find out what types of legislation they're already working on that may fit the criteria that jibes well with the 3rd District. And if there is any legislation that's out there, I want to let those folks know, fellow members, that we're willing to co-sponsor and be supportive so we can start building team right away with our fellow members and let them know that David Theus, the representative from the 3rd District, is willing to play as long as it jives with the 3rd District. Lastly, of course, I want to carry on President Trump's America First. This will not be an overnight solution, but we've got to start bringing home our supply chains and our manufacturing one step at a time, putting those initiatives in place.
Okay, thank you. For our second question, Ms. Wells, you will start first. Okay, you'll have 30 seconds to answer this question. And what we're looking for is, what committees do you seek and why?
I just write my question down, that way I don't mess up.
Okay.
So there are lots of committees in Washington, D.C. There's about a committee for every single thing. There's a lot of things I have extensive experience in, whether it be jobs, health care, small business administration. But I think the most important way to answer that question is to join committees that this district needs. Not necessarily what I want to do or what those that are most popular, but what this community needs. And one of those is actually an infrastructure committee. Thankfully for me, I've already received endorsement and support from a couple of the organizations that are involved in that. And in addition to that, healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you. Travis, just to review, it's a 30-second question. Okay, 30 seconds. Okay. Okay, Mr. Mulatto.
So as soon as you get there, it does matter what the priorities of the district are, but the ones that are picking it are the ones that are already up there, the establishments, so the speaker, those votes. So you might want to be on a specific committee, but the reality is they're going to choose for you. So I would love to be on the Veterans Affairs Committee because I have experience there. It is my top priority, and there's a big veteran population here in the state of Florida. However, you put me on any committee, and I will be effective. Most of those committees have an oversight committee. I will chase that justice and that truth no matter where it takes me. Thank you.
Mr. Englebright?
I would like to be on the Healthcare or the Veterans Affairs Committee. Since that's in my forte is the healthcare arena, I would like to work on that. However, I am a team player, so wherever they would need me, I'm willing to go and work on any committee, and I would give it 110% for each of those committees I was on. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Rollins?
One of the national security committees, because if we're not safe as a nation, then nothing else matters, and we've got to protect and keep America safe. And then agriculture, being a voice for agriculture within our district and across America. We got to fight for American workers and American farmers and ranchers.
Mr. Theus?
Yeah, so I believe consistency coming back to the district. So I obviously, as a small business person, I'd like to be involved in a small business committee. Agricultural be definitely, as far as the 3rd District, large president of agriculture and farmers and ranchers. And then veterans. I spent almost 13 years in the financial services industry helping long-term care clients turn on their benefits. I know firsthand what the labyrinth of navigating insurance looks like. I bet I can help them with navigating the VA bureaucracy.
And Ms. Kamak?
There we go. I think my colleague here alluded to this. When you get to Washington, you don't necessarily have a choice in the committee that you're placed on or the committees that you're placed on. It's done through the steering committee. However, if given the option, I would like to sit and serve on the House Appropriations Committee. The number one job of House Representatives is appropriating and controlling purse strings. So that was where we could have the greatest impact. I would also like to serve on the House Agriculture and Foreign Affairs Committee if given the opportunity.
Thank you. For our next question, Mr. Mulatto, we'll begin with you. This is a 1-minute response time. From what you've seen of from Congressman Yoho's performance during his tenure, which of his issues or initiatives would you like to continue, and which one would you like to do differently?
So I would like to do all of it differently because I'd actually get things done and actually get things passed. Now, within the last 8 years, I've gone to a lot of groups, and they tell me that they really like Mr. Yo. You don't go send somebody up there because they're likable. You go send somebody up there because they could do the things that you can't do, that you'd want to do, that you'd want for your family. and for your children and their futures. So in the last 8 years, yeah, you could name off a handful of different things, but were they original ideas? Were they suspension votes? Were they resolutions? Did they actually do a thing? Or was it handed down from committee or another gift wrap, solution from somebody else, special interest or anything? I tout that I could do these bills from scratch. When I say from scratch, I mean from beginning, from the first letter of that bill to the finish line. So absolutely 180. What you've had in the last 8 years is the baseline. I'm here to take it up to the level of where you want it to be, where you need it to be. So absolutely everything the exact opposite.
Okay, Mr. Engelbrecht.
With Congressman Yoho, the committees that he has worked on, I think he's done an honorable job. He has done some things for Putnam County. I know he had worked on an issue about 5 or 6 years ago. But I think at this time, this is a brand new opportunity for new blood to come in, new thinkers. And I think at this, what we can do is by fostering, having new people coming in, we can foster new ideas. And again, I would continue to work and find out what Mr. Yoho did. But in addition to, I would also add initiatives that I have, plans for each of the counties in my district that would bring in more revenue and it would bring in more jobs. So I would work on those things as well. So that's what I have. Thank you.
Mr. Rollins.
Someone once said that public service is a relay race, and Congressman Yoho has run a great race and is handing the baton off. And he's handing it off to one of us, and I'm honored to have the support of his son, Tyler Yoho, and the support of his daughter, Katie, because they know that I'll continue that servant-based leadership that Congressman Yoho has displayed. One of the things I really like is the Wingman Act, where it helps facilitate communication between congressional offices and the Department of Defense. That will be helpful for our veterans. I also appreciate Congressman Yoho's strong stance on communist China and standing and supporting the democratic ally Taiwan in the region. He's also been a voice for our farmers and ranchers. I'll continue that effort. So there's a number of initiatives, and then he's also done a great job of fighting for grants and local resources for our community, and I'll continue that as well.
Mr. Theus.
Well, I'll echo some of that. I'm in this race because of Mr. Yoho. I believe that I identify with him very well. He's always represented what I think a common sense approach to government. I consider him a servant leader, a principled man, and I just believe that he didn't represent like the rest of Washingtonians. So I do believe he had a decency act that he incorporated through communications. I know also he was big on trying to stop censorship. His role, I will say one piece, his role in the Far East into Taiwan and Hong Kong area, it seemed like it occupied a little bit more of his time in the latter part of his tenure. But I understand that we have a role in making sure that diplomacy and democracy is carried out throughout the world. So I respect his due diligence in that part of the world and his work that he's done. But I just hope to walk in his shoes and carry forward that servant leadership and principled approach that he brought to the table.
Mrs. Kamak.
Well, as Congressman Yoho's longtime deputy chief of staff and campaign manager, I feel like I have an unfair advantage in answering this question since I spearheaded so many of these initiatives alongside our team and the congressman. First and foremost, I want to carry on Project Putnam. I was actually the architect of Project Putnam, which is a 5-pillar economic development plan to stabilize the economy and grow jobs and rebuild the infrastructure in Putnam County, and it has been a very successful plan. I also want to continue the work with the 4 VA clinics that we appropriated funds for in 2015, 1 in Clay County, the 2 in Gainesville, and 1 in Marion County. We also have currently appropriations going through for Marion County and Clay County veterans nursing homes. I also want to see a continued expansion of American LNG, which is something that I spearheaded in Congressman Yoho's office, and economic development. When I left, we had just landed a $150 million capital investment here in our district, and I want to see these projects along with our work on foreign affairs and agriculture continue. Thank you.
And Mrs. Wells.
Thank you. to answer this question is kind of a little personal for me, because actually I would agree with you, Mr. Theus. One of the reasons I'm actually sitting here is I was lucky enough, my first meeting with Congressman Yoho is he sat in my office, he listened to my job concerns, and he met and interacted with my staff. He never came to Clay County without always letting me know he was in town and there was anything he could do. I think it's important that his example of servant leadership, whether it be a text or a call or a meeting with the Chamber of Commerce, was always very important. That is something I would love for that to continue and actually blossom even more. I had a lot of respect for him and on the work that he was doing with foreign affairs. He has stood strong against Communist China. But also, as Mrs. Kamek was referring to, there was a lot of economic development planning that he was doing, and that community planning needs to expand out because rural America has been left behind for a long time. And number 4 is lastly, the VA clinic, which I help him get the participants needed to register. Thank you.
Okay, for our next question, we'll start with Mr. Engelbrecht. You have 2 minutes to respond. With agriculture being a major part of your district, where will you stand, or what is your thoughts on the immigration issues such as E-Verify and the work of visa programs balancing the building of the wall and border security with the immigration needs of the farmers for picking their crops?
I definitely support the immigration reform, especially at our ports of entry. You know, through that, the ports of entry, they actually bring in young women and sell them off to human traffickers for prostitution and other things. But as far as the immigrants coming into the country, I believe that there's simple ways of being able to issue the cards, do the background checks, bring them in, have them work, and also provide a good place for them to live. A lot of the immigrants, when they come in and they do these crops, they live in little shanties. I think if the government was a little bit more involved with the immigrants that are coming in, we can make sure that the immigrants don't get taken advantage of, because they do get taken advantage of. You've heard so many times where the individual is working and yet they can't make enough money to even get out of the system. So I believe we can work on that. Immigration is definitely needed, and I think we have some wonderful opportunities in the agriculture department to fulfill these needs with the immigrants that we have. Thank you.
So we absolutely need to build a wall and have a strong border. That's national security. It's not just an immigration issue. It's about knowing who's coming and going. And there are people who want to come into our country and harm us and take down our society, and we have to have strong borders for protection. And also, we are a nation that believes in the rule of law, and we have to follow the law. And so when people come to this country, they have to do so legally. And I understand that agriculture has needs and labor challenges, but they can fill those through legal workers coming to this country. We know who they are, and they're coming here legally. And then also American workers. And that balance, I think, is the key. Prioritizing American workers, prioritizing American farmers. And a big part of this is the Communist China piece, because Communist China is dumping a whole bunch of products. Take tilapia, for instance, fish. They have these ponds that are disgusting, and they let the tilapia grow up in mercury-infested waters, and then they dump that onto the markets. And so American farmers have a tough time competing because they have way more regulations here, whereas China has zero regulations. And so we have harmful products coming in from China. We've got to do a better job of standing up to China, and they're trying to cheat. And that will help American farmers. But we have to have a strong immigration system, and I do support E-Verify.
Mr. Theus?
I'm going to ask you one more time to repeat that. I get to hear the 30 voices down here. Go ahead, please repeat the question.
Sure, no problem. So with agriculture being a major part of your district, where will you stand on the immigration issues such as E-Verify and the worker visa program, balancing the need of building the wall and border security with the need for immigrant workers for the farmers?
Thank you, sir. You know, we've got to, first of all, we got to plug the dike down on the southern border. We've got to build this wall. So we have to stop the illegal immigration chain that's coming across our southern border. And we have to not forget about our northern border as well, but the wall is probably most prevalent on the south. The next thing is we've got rules on the books. We've got laws on the books. We should start enforcing those laws. But here's the real deal, folks. These poor immigrants have been a proverbial football kicked back and forth across this border. The liberal left decided they wanted to have free immigration to pull people in because ultimately that would be new benefits, a supply chain to provide new benefits, free benefits, and voters. And we on the right side saw this as an opportunity to bring in low cost labor to pick our crops. So I think we need to deploy a little grace to these people. They've been mistreated along the way by both parties, left and right, and start applying the laws that we have on the book for legal immigration. Those that are already here through DACA, we've got to apply some grace to these folks and put together a 10 to 12 year path to citizenship that allows them to work legally in the country. Of course, if they break the law, they may be ousted for doing something like that, but it's time for us to apply grace to these individuals. These are creations of God, just like you and I. Just because they come from a different foreign land doesn't mean they should be treated any differently. But let's be honest with each other. The left has consistently tried to bring these folks in to push out more benefits and welfare on them to get new voters, and the right has historically said, under the guise of we need cheap labor, because our American citizens won't go pick strawberries and the rest of their crops. So I believe our agriculture needs a labor supply. I get that. But let's make it legal. So bring these people into our house, welcome them, but put a system in place so they can become legal and on a path to citizenship.
Mrs. Kamak?
So as the ag candidate in the race, I grew up on a cattle ranch and have worked extensively in agriculture over the last decade here in Florida. Agriculture is the second driver of Florida's economy. We have every kind of commodity that you can imagine, whether it is dairy, whether it is row crops, whether it's timber. And the thing that is unique about Florida ag is it is not seasonal in the sense that we don't have a typical season the way the rest of the country does. So knowing this, and this is a unique challenge, the government has built a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to immigration and immigration policies. Yes, we need to build the wall. Yes, we need to enforce the laws on the books. We need to support Customs and Border Patrol. But a full implementation of E-Verify needs to be coupled with an actual workable guest worker program, which I'm proud to have worked on with Congressman Yoho over the several past years. This means getting a pre-vetted pool of workers that have been backgrounded and have been driven by industry needs versus what the government decides, and also creating a path for those, not amnesty, but a path for those that are currently here and have been here for a long time to legally come forward and get right with the law. This means taking the program, the current H-2A program, out from under Department of Labor to USDA, which is where the program should be housed because USDA understands guest worker issues, and getting rid of the transportation and housing components. That burden on employers currently needs to go away. This will also streamline the I-9 program that has plagued our system for so long. Once we do this, we can give certainty to the employer and the employee that are working in the fields. I disagree with one of my colleagues up here. You cannot find American workers to do these jobs. So we have to get smart and we have to get innovative about how we're going to solve this problem. If we're serious about securing our supply chain, it starts with our food supply. And in order to do that, we have to have a workable guest worker program that puts America first, but also addresses these key issues that have plagued us for 30 plus years.
Mrs. Wells?
Well, I feel like being in the jobs business my entire career, this is like a two-part answer. The first part is E-Verify. Based on my firsthand experience, not just agriculture, but in rural America, E-Verify is a problem. It has been a problem as a small business owner to compete with fairness and equality in multiple industries in the business that we are in. So I support the only way, which is E-Verify and correct I-9s to keep things fair and honest, because we need to be able to allow people to grow business, to fill jobs, and contribute to their community. The second part is the immigration. Again, in the jobs business, immigration, number one for me is build the wall, because I'm tired of spending money on people coming back and forth across the border. But we need legal immigration with tight borders. We are a nation of immigrants because of opportunity and freedom, but we must also allow those seeking asylum and national and humanitarian crisis to come across. Create paths to fulfill these jobs while creating a path to citizenship. And also, if you come here, you need to learn the English language. And lastly, agriculture and farmers, when we're filling jobs, this is a job, like I agree with a previous person, is that a lot of Americans don't want to do these jobs. I'm tired of our farmers being one crop away from poverty.
Mr. Mulatto? Absolutely. With agriculture being a major part of your district, where will you stand on immigration issues such as E-Verify and worker visa programs, balancing the need to build a wall and border security, as well as providing immigrants to pick the crops for the farmers that you have in your district?
So, as a first-generation Filipino-American, I do understand the trials, the tribulations, the hard work. I've lived it. My parents talk about their stories, their hardships. It is a common story, a story that hasn't been told yet, which I will tell on the House floor. So we have rules on the books. We need to enforce the law of the land, because that's what we are. We need to encourage people to immigrate, come here the right way, to have the right incentives, that they want to take their traditions, their cultures, and improve, and like a melting pot that we say we are. So I support E-Verify. We got to support and enforce the rules of the law. But again, what the other colleagues are saying is that Americans out there don't want to do these jobs. So that's the problem, is the entitlement part. It's unless we were 0% unemployment, then I don't see why somebody wouldn't want to do that. You reap what you sow. So you got to think and take personal responsibility on where are you at in life and how did you get here and how do you improve? Because these things could change every day. I was told that this day would never happen, but you got to take that first step out there. The other thing is, it's not so much people jumping over and back and over a physical wall. Yeah, that does happen, but if you talk to anybody who actually knows these things, if you're getting it from a news outlet, then yeah, that's what you're going to say. But I've actually had to go to these hearings handling homeland security, hearing hundreds and thousands of pages of testimony from experts, from undersecretaries, from secretaries. It's us losing track, not having the resources of those legally here. So when they come over here with the visas, it's the visa overstays. Now, even just specifically a small item, the student visa program, DHS, if you go back and just Google search these things, we do the work, but they're sitting there in an electronic bookshelf, because the public out there aren't reading these things. We can't go back talking about the same things. We know it's not people jumping over all the time. A good portion of it is that we don't have the resources to track them, and people aren't respecting the law of the land. So we've got to respect the law of the land, and it's a cultural problem.
Okay, thank you. For our next question, Mr. Rollins, we'll begin with you. You have 2 minutes to respond to this question. Considering the large number of veterans that you have in your district and the new VA facility open in Middleburg, what additional priorities do you see for our veterans, and what will you do to encourage communication and accountability to your veterans?
Well, I'm the only veteran on this stage, and so I think that gives an advantage of understanding some of the challenges our veterans are facing. But and as a commissioner, I fought for a number of things to help our veterans. One of the things that's really neat is at the beginning of each meeting, we have a veteran lead us in the pledge, and it's a great reminder that no matter what decisions we're making, that comes at a price, and it's the price that that veteran who's leading us in the pledge paid. So specific things I would do is working to improve the VA. We've done some great work with that, but we need it more portable so that if you're waiting in a line for months to get care, that you have a voucher essentially to go to a private doctor to get the care you need. So continuing to strengthen that. And dental care within the VA system is another big challenge that isn't often talked about. So reforms to the VA, simplifying the process. So if you apply for and you're waiting on a veteran status, a designation, that happens more quickly, because whether you get or don't get the status, you should know. You shouldn't be left in limbo for years waiting for the VA to make a decision. As a if I have the honor of serving in Congress, what I'll do is I'll have a designated team member dedicated only to veterans, and I will meet with them weekly and go through, we'll have a status chart of where things are, where claims are, and that type of thing, and that will be one of my number one priorities, is making sure that we help you navigate that process of the federal government. Because our veterans have served and fought, and many died for this country, and they deserve to be treated with respect when they're here at home and not be lost in the sea of bureaucracy, which oftentimes happens. So those are a couple things, but all right.
Okay, Mr. Theus?
I think from initially a policy standpoint, it's important that we get this ability for our veterans not only to use the VA hospitals, but other hospitals. I know that Bill's talked about his brother driving from Daytona Beach to Gainesville. So portability is important. I think we've got these beautiful hospitals and facilities all over the state. Why do we have to drive 175 miles or more or less to get to another hospital? So from a policy standpoint, that's important. Locally, there's a gentleman that ran in our race early on that actually worked for Mr. Yoho by the name of Chief Ed Silva. And he was a constituent advocate on Mr. Yoho's staff and dealt directly with VA, Social Security, and FEMA constituent advocacy. And so Mr. Silva, upon getting out of the race, actually endorsed me based on my commitment to the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, and then my feelings and concerns toward our veterans. And I've spoken to many people who actually Mr. Silva's helped their fathers, their spouses, and actually actively participated in casework on a constituent advocacy level. So if and when elected, I'm going to reach out to Mr. Silva, if he'll have me, and offer him a job to bring him right in so we can pick up where the things have been left off, and him can go right to work in our Orange Park office and start helping on a constituency advocacy. I think it's real important for you folks to know that as a congressman, I'm in charge, as our fellow members, of the purse strings. And so when an agency like the VA comes to us and says, hey, we need some more money, it's budget time again, I've got two things I can do. I can go back to the president and say, Mr. President, my constituents are having problems navigating this behemoth bureaucracy. Can you put a new set of eyes and a sharp pencil in the VA and see if we can't cut some of the red tape? Or, Mr. VA, you guys need some money? How about we put a sharp pencil and a new set of eyes on your budget so that we can get some less red tape for our veterans?
Mrs. Kamak?
Thank you. Can you repeat the question?
Considering the large number of veterans that you have in your district and the new VA facility open in Middleburg, what additional priorities do you see for our veterans, and what will you do to encourage communication and accountability to our veterans?
Absolutely. So, as mentioned, the VA clinic in Clay County was one of my passion projects, one of the projects that I spearheaded. And for those of you watching, it is located on 400 College Drive. They will begin seeing their very first veterans in September. So please make sure that you come by. In addition to that clinic, there were 3 other VA clinics that I helped spearhead, 2 in Gainesville, 1 in Ocala. And my goal will be to see those through to completion. It is a very complicated process from start to finish in bringing new clinics and resources to districts. So I'm excited to see those through. In addition, finishing the Marion and Clay County VA nursing homes that we began the appropriations process for. We have an aging veteran population in our district, and these are critical facilities for that particular demographic. I would also reintroduce the Wingman Bill, which will allow congressional offices to communicate and check on the status of appeals cases with read-only access at the VA. I work directly with the St. Pete office, who is in charge of this particular VISN when it comes to veterans cases. Whether it is appeals, military sexual trauma, comp and pen, rating systems, I have worked these cases extensively with Congressman Yoho's military and veterans liaison, Dave Hill, who has endorsed our campaign. And for that reason, I think that I am best suited in order to work these issues. We also launched a veterans coalition that includes notable veterans in the area like Captain Bob Ewan, Admiral Tom Watson, and the director of National Veterans Families Support Group. So these are some of the things that we'll be doing, but also we need to streamline the process by which a veteran or a service member transitions into civilian life from DOD to VA. So simplifying that process, getting the systems to talk to each other, and getting rid of the bureaucracy, because we have so many different issues, whether you were activated under Title 32 or Title 10. These are the things that we need to simplify so that we can deliver the best care and service to our veterans. Thank you.
Mrs. Wells?
Thank you. I'm a daughter of a veteran, and I have many family members that are veterans. When I first heard of the VA facility coming to Clay County, it was one of my priorities when Ted Yoho talked about it. I even ensured through the staffing mechanism of the company that we had that we got, and we reached out to the network in this community to make sure that we had the required number of people to sign up for this program to make sure that we ensured that Clay County got the VA facility. But I'll be honest with you, I've spent a great deal of my life as an experienced clinician in healthcare, and I will tell you, I have a lot to say related to this issue. Number one, our veterans deserve the best and top care. They don't have it. They don't have the facilities, they don't have the care, and they don't have the staff. They deserve this honor, and we need to make this happen. There should be no more long wait lines and dreary-looking buildings. We need to do everything we can to make sure this happens. I would even be interested in exploring ways to privatize the VA.
Mr. Mulatto?
Can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. Considering the large number of veterans that you have in your district and the new VA facility now here in Clay County, what additional priorities do you see for your veterans, and what will you do to encourage communication and accountability for your veterans?
So, as mentioned, I've worked for two vice chairmen of the VA committee. That is over a decade of experience, not just hearing about the stories, these tragic stories on the news, but actually having, again, to read the testimonies, meeting with these families, meeting with, hearing the testimonies from the VA or, veteran service organizations. So these clinics, authorizing it is the hardest part if you do know anything about the VA and the construction history. VA first off needs to get out of the construction business. They need to go back to actually doing what they were meant to do, service connection, taking care of our veterans, that they're not just a number, that they're actually patients, they're actually individuals with families, with feelings that sacrifice daily for our freedoms. So building the clinic is one thing. To get an appropriations, that is a 5-minute job. Yeah, you have to meet with the staff over there, but it's not a big lift. It's the authorizing, and then it's also the implementing. So if you look up, just Google search Orlando VA debacle, Aurora, Colorado, these buildings may look nice, but are they actually helping veterans when they don't have the right credentials or the licensing for the radio techs? It is a debacle. We need to stop making buildings look pretty and actually have them do their jobs. Now, asking for money, like the VA budget has increased exponentially, but the problems are all still there. It isn't do they need more money? They have the money. They're just not using it wisely. If you literally, OIG, Google search it, Veterans Affairs OIG, and if you have time watching cat videos on YouTube, check these things out. This will blow your mind. So there are tons of problems. The transition part, the mental health, we haven't really cared for our veterans, and that's the point.
Mr. Engelbrecht?
VA accessibility is the number one priority. We need less bureaucracy. So any VA veterans out there that are watching this here, if they have to go and ask for disability and get disability benefits, they have to travel several hundred miles at sometimes to go to a specialized VA doctor. There's no reason for that. They should be able to go to any hospital. So one of the priorities would be to have one of those doctors in every hospital that we have in our in the area itself. That way they can only drive 15 miles or 10 miles. Currently, my father, who lives in Mississippi, he had shoulder surgery. He had to drive 100 miles over to Birmingham, Alabama. I believe it was Birmingham. It was over in Alabama in order to get that surgery. There was no reason for that. We have too many hospitals and too many doctors in the area here. The other thing is the VA, I can speak from experience, they do not pay their bills. A lot of companies does not want to take the VA benefit because they are not getting paid. The third thing that I would do is with the president's, he wants to bring back vocational and technical assistance or vocational technical schools. And I think that our veterans or the individuals who are honorably discharged, whether they were in there for 4 years or 6 years, they have an opportunity to go back to these schools and learn a trade. Because some of the jobs that they work is a sharpshooter. Okay, what can you do when you come out of the service as a sharpshooter? You need to be taught a trade. And that's what happens with a lot of our veterans when they come out of a position that they are no longer able to fulfill. Sometimes they end up going homeless because they don't have another skill. It is very, very important that our veterans learn that skill before they actually get discharged out of the service. Veterans need our help, and they will be a #1 priority for me as well. Thank you.
For our next question, Mr. Theus, we'll begin with you. You'll have 2 minutes to answer this question. With our already staggering federal debt and deficit and an estimated $6 trillion added because of COVID, we will soon reach a tipping point where we can no longer print our way out of it. What specifically do you think we must do to get our budget and spending under control?
Thank you, Captain. That was a fun one. Well, just like any household, if we're spending money, we've got to start looking at where, as I tell my clients in my financial services background, let's find the holes. Let's find the leaks. Let's go out and find where we're dumping money either through fraud or through misuse. So we've got to find the leaks and start plugging those up, first things and foremost. The second thing is, and I've said this each time we have one of these meetings, is we've got to get back to work. We've got to get our gross national product, our gross domestic product, we've got to get products being made internally, and we've got to start shipping things overseas and selling things. So just like a business, if we're bleeding money, we've got to find the leaks. So these are bureaucracies within our these are agencies within our government that are typically bleeding, and we've got to start producing things again. So I know this is somewhat simplistic, but the reality is it's just like a business. If you are running your business and we are constantly borrowing money, then we've got too many expenses going out. We've got to start looking at that. So how do we do that? Where are we going to start cutting? I know no one ever wants to start talking about the funds for benefits. That's just the golden egg that nobody ever wants to be political about. And I don't think we have to address those right away. So not to scare anybody, but we have some spending that we can look back within our budgets, within our agencies. We talked about the VA, for example, just for a couple of moments. President Trump talked about the post office recently and how we're bleeding on the post office, and he had a very simple solution. Charge more for the packages. Charge more for these overnight packages. So we need to start looking at each agency one at a time and look at their balance sheet, if you will, find out where the bleeding is, and start spending less and producing more.
Mrs. Kamak?
This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, is our national debt, and it is the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about because it becomes a political football. We are on a collision course to austerity measures if we do not get our national debt and our spending under control, and it's been made quite clear that we are not going to be able to cut our way out of this. Currently, only 32% of our entire national budget is discretionary spending. That is government and defense and interest on our debt as we know it. With about 62-ish, 65% of our national spending all on mandatory autopilot spending, that's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and no one is touching it. No one is talking about it because they are scared that someone is going to hit them politically for it. We have to have the courage to have this conversation about getting our national debt under control. It starts with going back to zero-based budgeting. We cannot do baseline budgeting any longer. That is just a rubber stamp of current spending, and then it is a political football. We need to introduce a balanced budget amendment. We need to be responsible with the revenues that we are given, and I like the idea of giving all of the items that are not under the constitutional authority back to the states, like the Department of Education. This is not a federal expenditure that we should be making. I personally am in support of the penny plan, which is Senator Rand Paul's plan to balance the budget. If we cut 1 penny out of every federal dollar spent, we will balance the budget between 5 to 7 years. If we continue to take another penny out, we can start eating away at the deficit and the national debt. And if you add a third penny, we can actually build a program that will cover our national infrastructure. In addition, we need to increase our revenues. That starts with bringing American manufacturing back. We can do that and facilitate that by encouraging investment, simplifying our tax code, and creating an environment that is conducive to innovation, research, development, and investment in the United States. Thank you.
Mrs. Wells?
The federal budget. I put it simply a lot of times this way: it's not what is cut, but what actually has to be kept. You know, it's those tough decisions we all have to make in our lives and home. We only bring in this much money and we can only afford this, right? So what I believe is going to happen is Congress is never going to get this done. I believe that through Amendment 5 and a convention of the state, I think we have 15 now. It's 34 to pass and 38 to ratify. I think I'm willing to do anything that it takes to champion, to sponsor, to co-sponsor, so that we can allow people to keep their hard-earned money, and we need to be making better decisions about what we're in the business of. A lot of the things, as Ms. Kamek was saying earlier, from a constitutional perspective, a lot of the things that we have sitting in the federal budgets need to be pushed down to the state. We need to stop taking on everything. We can't afford it. Our children cannot afford it. Can you imagine what the inflation is going to look like in this later in our children's lives? Again, I am willing to do whatever it takes to lower taxes, reduce regulation, and remove this burden.
Mr. Mulatto?
So when Congressman Yoho first got in, that was what, 16 trillion? And every candidate, every member goes on the guise of reducing the deficit. We raise it 1.1 trillion every year. And whenever there's an emergency, an unexpected emergency, which, by the way, happens every year, we add on to that. So when we think about these grandiose ideas about how we're going to solve this, this giant problem here, we need to do the stuff that we already know that is failing, chipping at it. And I bring this up a lot, but Medicare overpayments, that's billions of dollars. You mean to tell me that we don't have the technology, the idea, the vision to stop us from overpaying people or underpaying? So that's the thing when people say that, why don't we just talk to these agencies and just get our house in order like it's a simple thing? You know what? Nobody's solved that conundrum yet, so what makes you think that you're going to do that? By the way, agencies already do this. You don't think that they don't do us? They send us reports all the time, every year, about how much millions or billions they cut if they cut X, Y, and Z. But if you have a constituent that, likes or wants any of those X, Y's, and Z's, then you're kind of put in a pickle there. The problem is that members need to tell the truth to their constituents and say, I'm not saying that this isn't a priority. It's just we can't do it at the moment. Now, that doesn't mean not ever, but give them an outlay. Say, hey, we're overspending, and like a grocery cart, if you go into Publix or anywhere and you don't have a game plan, you don't have a list, you'll walk out with a lot of things you didn't need. That is fact. So it's the same thing, but you have 435 children putting in their little snacks in there. You need an adult in Congress to tell people, hey, this is what we could spend today. Doesn't mean we can't do that tomorrow. But there is no public trust because they don't have any solutions. They throw money at a problem, and that's all they wrote.
Mr. Engelbrecht?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. So with our already staggering federal debt and deficit and the almost $6 trillion that have been added due to COVID, we will soon be reaching a tipping point where we no longer print our way out of it. What specifically must we do to get our budget and spending under control?
Well, I believe right now, and everybody can agree, there's a lot of fat in the government. With our budgets, we have so much room to take and reduce the costs and increase our revenue. First of all, we need to reduce our federal subsidies to some of these big corporations because they can actually still make the money what they're doing. The second thing is the government's fiscal year is a 930 year end. And every year, every department has to do a budget. And when they do their budget at the end of the year, if they don't spend that money, they either use it or they lose it. So if they lose it, they start back over the following year with a less amount of budget in that department. I think there should be some profit sharing in that, if you want to say. Meaning that if their budget was $1 million, they only spent $900,000, then they would split the difference. $50,000 would go back to that department and stay in that department, but the other $50,000 would be used to turn around and cut our deficit. And I think that can be used in all of these departments. The Department of Education can be reduced significantly because in each state should be responsible for the education that we receive here in each of these states. With Governor DeSantis with the BEST program, Betterment or Benchmark for Excellent Student Thinking. We are taking away the Common Core. There still needs to be an oversight of education, but we don't need to spend 5% in the Department of Education. I think also, too, with a fair tax. If we have a fair tax, then anybody who comes into this country, legally or illegally, will pay the same amount of money as you and I. Because right now, when we have illegal immigrants coming into our country, they are not paying their fair share of taxes. That is income tax, that is Social Security, and that is Medicare that is needed to take care of our seniors. So if we go to a fair tax, then that will help some of the problem. And then also bring manufacturing back to the United States. We need to have a product that we can turn around and sell to the world where we are starting to make a profit and not the countries making a profit off of us. Thank you.
And Mr. Rollins.
A lot of great ideas have been mentioned, and I think a big part of it is returning the federal government to its proper role. And so as a teacher, I agree with eliminating or greatly reducing the federal Department of Education. You could put that $85 billion that's currently going to the federal Department of Education back in block grants to the states, and then you could have a national education advisor to the president, and they could come up with national priorities, but states should then compete to improve education across the country. There's another aspect of this is if we did block grants to the states through Medicare and Medicaid, then states could innovate and create better solutions. Right now, it's estimated last year, I think it was in 2018, $1 billion was given away through Social Security to dead people. $1 billion. That's just one example among many of the waste, fraud, and abuse that's happening. But the solution to that is not more government, it's localizing it and pushing that funding to the states and letting them compete and have more accountability. One thing that I think is key on this and that hasn't necessarily been mentioned, we can all present great ideas, but what it's going to require is courage. It's going to require being willing to vote no a lot. It's going to be required to be unpopular at times. And as a county commissioner, I've taken some 4-to-1 votes, and I've been the one. I've been willing to stand alone. And we've privatized some things as a commission. We privatized mosquito control, and we've actually saved money and improved the product as a result of that. So it takes courage and a willingness to actually do it, regardless of the political consequences. That's why I describe running for Congress as a willingness to go to the war zone of Washington, because it is. It's not always going to be fun. It's going to be tough days fighting and battling for conservative principles. I've already done it, and I'm willing to do it again.
Okay, so for our next question, Ms. Kamak, we'll start with you. You have 2 minutes to answer this question. So for years, when Democrats had control of the House and the Senate and the White House, they touted the achievement of Obamacare. And Republicans campaigned relentlessly about repealing the Obamacare. Then once they got the power of the Senate, the House, and the White House, they did not fulfill their campaign promise of repealing Obamacare. If the Republicans ever get their act together and repeal Obamacare, now they're saying repeal and replace. What is the replace? What does that look like? And what is your position on health care policy and the government's role in administering it?
Thank you. So, yes, this has been one of the frustrating things, being a conservative and watching us having the control of both the House, the Senate, and the White House, and not being able to pass legislation when it comes to our broken healthcare system. And there is no doubt about it, our healthcare system is broke. I think first we need to agree fundamentally that with healthcare, we need to restore the relationship to be the patient and the doctor. Right now, we have a situation where the insurance companies are dead smack in the middle of it, dictating who gets care and when and how. We need to remove the insurance companies from the middle of that discussion and restore that relationship between patients and doctors. We also have talked a lot about tort reform over the years, but yet lack the political willpower to actually do it. It's long past time that we actually address tort reform, because that is going to be the backbone of a true replacement plan that is workable. I also believe that we should be able to purchase across state lines, increase competition, let the free market do its job in giving consumers the best options and choice for their personal health care. I think that the government has a limited role when it comes to health care, whether that is ensuring coverage for pre-existing conditions and making sure that drug prices are able to be negotiated and kept low. But I do think that the role of government is very limited when it comes to our health care. Let innovation drive quality health care that is accessible. And I think that that is how we start the conversation and get the actual work done in getting health care back in the hands of doctors and patients and their families. Thank you.
Mrs. Wells.
Well, this is probably the most interesting fight I ever had. My first time in Washington, it was March 27th, 2017, and I'm sitting in the Roosevelt room, and guess what the fight is? Repeal and replace Obamacare, or ACA. Here's what I will tell you. Our healthcare system is flawed, and it needs to be improved. However, it is one of the best systems in the world. We need a free market approach. Government needs to get out of the business of healthcare. We need to get the doctors back in control of taking care of patients, and we need to get drug prices down and transparency in healthcare pricing. We lost control of the House, and when we had control of the House, this is the one time that we could have been able to get this done, and it did not get done. It was probably one of the most frustrating days of my life back in March the 27th, 2017. We need to make this a major priority. Americans deserve to be able to have affordable care at affordable prices.
Mr. Mulatto?
I do agree that every American out there should have access to quality, affordable health care. Now, during these arguments and times, again, I working for two bosses that had to fight on these and deliberate on these in a committee process. So it's not just the House when you vote up or down, it's fighting and doing these battles and representing the thoughts of your constituents and their ideas during this markup process. So when people say, I'm just going to do this, make it transparent, make it affordable, that's nonsense, because it's a lot more difficult, obviously, than you would think. When you would have to vote on something and then a tweak or a section gets thrown in there because of the processes of the House, we all say, how do these members actually have time to read that? They don't. Staff reads these. So if your idea is to go up there and to redo the same thing in terms of we're just going to have staff to read this and advise me, we're always having to make hard decisions under the gun at the 11th hour. And I do agree, we dropped the ball. Both parties dropped the ball on this. You're trying to reform this thing that's going to affect so many people, and when you do have your shot, you drop the ball. So yeah, we should have had a plan there. Now, when we were doing these discussions, you know, they want to give you more options. But with the Affordable Care Act, it wasn't ready for prime time at all. And we saw that they had to push their own enforcements on when these things had to go up. The own administration had to push it. They knew it wasn't ready, but they needed to for political purposes. This is what happens when time and time again, we do put politics over policy and over the American people. You could have done things like do cross state lines, non-pre-existing conditions, and we even found out from Fortune 500 companies then that they figured out that if they just paid a penalty, it would be cheaper. So again, people need to do the right thing. Nothing is ever free. Let the free market work. We need to do something else that we haven't done before.
Mr. Engelbrecht?
So the Obamacare, when it was introduced one day, and the next day everybody had to vote on it, and that's what the House Democrats did. They passed it through. When Republicans had the opportunity in the first 2 years of President Trump, when we had both the Senate and the House, we failed. The Republicans were not even sure as to what they wanted to pass, but Senator John McCain at the time was the last vote to come in, and he denied the repeal of Obamacare. Now, there are some good things about the Obamacare that I like. One is you have your children be on there until they're 26. I think that's important because when a young person starts out in life, they have so many bills. They're paying off their student loans and so forth. They're getting their mortgage going. So having that does help the individuals, the young adults. The number two is pre-existing conditions. I think it's absolutely necessary that we continue and protect those pre-existing conditions. The other thing is the problem with what we have now is we have Medicaid and then we have Obamacare. But there are Americans, many middle-class Americans actually fall in between the two, meaning the amount of money that they make. So in order to qualify for Medicaid, you can only make a certain amount. In order to get Obamacare, you have to have a minimum amount that money you make. There's individuals in there that are in between there, and those are the ones that are getting lost. So I believe right now with this, what we can do, and at this point, we have too many lawyers who generated and who drafted this 1,000-page document that nobody read and signed over the next day. We need more businessmen up there to understand and see what's going on. I do believe from the last 12 years, we've been able to see the mistakes, or the last time when it was implemented, and I guess it was in 08, so maybe 12 years, maybe a little bit later. But we have an opportunity to go back and scrutinize it and break it down. And I do believe there is a plan out there. We just have to follow through and make sure everybody is aware of it and understands it completely. Thank you.
Mr. Rollins?
Repeal Obamacare, expand health savings accounts, and put consumers in charge of their health care choices, and then reduce bureaucracy. 1/3 the cost of health care is government bureaucracy. Picture a giant stack of papers from here to the moon. That doesn't improve your health care. That's just the insurance companies and government getting involved. So if we reduce that, we'll reduce the cost, make it more affordable for you as a consumer, and put you back in charge, you and your doctor.
Mr. Theus?
The number one concern dealing with my business owner clients was healthcare reform, the cost of healthcare. Believe it or not, it's number one over taxes, how much more money they can keep, the cost of paying their mortgage yet again by paying their healthcare costs. So they asked me, David, if you're going to run this race and you're going to go to Washington, please stand up to this healthcare reform and repeal this thing. So I support the principles of transforming the individual marketplace's current regulatory structure, unwinding the ACA's Washington-centric approach, and returning regulatory authority to the individual states. I support states receiving federal grants designed to provide low-income individuals with access to affordable coverage, portability in the individual marketplace, and having pre-existing conditions covered. After all, the 10th Amendment helps us to define the concept of federalism, the relationship between the federal government and the states. Absent from the list of powers given to Congress in the Constitution is the power to issue direct orders to governments of the states. I would venture to say that our Obamacare was unconstitutional. So, yes, unwind this thing, and let's hold our representatives accountable. When Mr. Trump got elected, our fellow Republicans were more concerned about how do we get Mr. Trump out of office. Let's make a list of those people. Maybe they need to be reminded that we serve you, our constituents, your needs and concerns, not Washingtonian. So I am committed to have the intestinal fortitude and the spine to go back to those halls, even as a freshman. At 6'4", 300 pounds, I'll make someone understand that we're serious about this in the 3rd District for our fellow business owners.
Okay, thank you for that. So what we've heard from this panel is we've discussed debt, but yet no matter who we elect, the debt continues to go up. We've talked about Obamacare, and even when Republicans are in charge, it's still there. And so there's a mood in the electorate that really they're just fed up because there's a clear distinction between Democrats and Republicans. When Democrats get elected, they show up, shut up, line up, do as they're told, and push as hard as they can. And when Republicans get elected, they show up, shut up, sit on their hands, wait till they're no longer in power, and then whine that they can't do anything. Here's your chance. We're going to start with you, Mrs. Wells. You have 30 seconds. Here's your chance to tell the people that are going to vote for you why you.
I wasn't expecting that one so fast, but I will tell you why me. Because I have never been in an elected position. I have never played in politics. When I went to Washington back in March of 17, I was shocked at what I saw. The bottom line is I have been bold and courageous when I didn't have to. I have stood up for the community when I didn't have to. I have never been paid to advocate what is right. I will always do what is right for this community. Thank you.
Mr. Mulatto?
I'm Joe Mulatto, and I am the candidate that will fight 14, not 12 rounds for you. I've been to D.C., I've seen the corruption. I already have their blueprint. I've seen the Republicans' blueprint and the Democrats' blueprint. I'm here to usher in a new era because it is something that we need. I am the candidate with the qualifications where it matters, the heart where it matters, and on August 18th, I want you to put your vote where it matters. Thank you.
Mr. Engelbrecht?
As a business owner for 26 years in the healthcare field, I have to work with transparency with my employees. And I continue, and I will offer that to our constituents as well. I believe at this time, I am the only one on my business card, here's my business card, on the flip side of it, has my cell number. My cell number will be available to anybody to call me, to text me, and to let me know what their concerns, because I work for you, and that's how it should be, and government has lost its way. Thank you.
Mr. Rollins?
A proven track record, whether it's in the classroom teaching the Constitution, in Congress, I'll follow it. Whether it's on the county commission fighting to make Clay County a Second Amendment sanctuary, even when people were angry and pushing back, I stood my ground and voted my principles and led that effort. For term limits, the list goes on. Or whether it's literally fighting for our country. Everyone loves to use the term, I'll fight for you. I'm the only one on this platform who's actually fought for our country in a combat zone, defending our freedom under President Trump, and I'll fight alongside of him in Congress.
Mr. Theus?
I don't know if it's an attitude or a saying that I have, but I wasn't looking for this job when I found it. And what that means is this: if I go to Washington on your behalf and they sit on their hands, or they try to tell me, be a team player, Dave, let's move the ball, I'm going to let them remind them that you hired me. My senior members didn't hire me, but you, the constituents, did. So I answer to you. And if I only serve 2 years and you fire me because I didn't do my job, then I'll be thankful to have served you.
And Mrs. Kamak?
So the question is, why you? Well, I believe that I am the best candidate for this race and can take on DC because I'm the only candidate who can hit the ground running. I have the know-how, the experience, educational, and the work experience to know how to get this job done. I know the games and pitfalls that are in DC, the games that are played, and I am the only candidate who knows how to avoid those, both on the policy side and the political side. I'm not afraid to take on the squad. I'm not afraid to take on the establishment, and that is why I think I am the best candidate to go to Washington, D.C. for Florida's 3rd Congressional District.
Okay, thank you, candidates. Now that ends our question portion. Now we're going to move into our 2 minutes close. Ms. Kamak, you were first last time. Mr. Theus, you were last. So the last will be first. Mr. Theus.
Okay, I just want to revisit the role of your representative. The framers, when constructing the Constitution, decided that to be a congressman, to be a legislator, they wrote out the criteria and the expectations, if you will, in Article 1 of the Constitution. Article 2 was the definition and the criteria to be the president. And Article 3 was the Supreme Court. So I think it's pretty important. Anytime they make something number one, it must have been first and foremost on their mind, this is an important role. Long are the days are gone that Abraham Lincoln was stepping over people that were sleeping in the people's house, people that came to the White House to express their needs and concerns. Our founders knew that this would be a vast and great land, and that we would need representatives to be representing us from towns like Brooker or Stark or Green Cove Springs even. And so they knew that you and I as citizenry would not be able to make it back to Washington on a daily or weekly basis. And so us as representatives, me hopefully, to serve you, need to have our eyes and ears on the ground to listen carefully to your needs and concerns, and then take those sentiments back to Washington on your behalf. This is an important race, folks. Every race I've ever been a part of as far as a voter is concerned, it's always said this is a big election. This is a big one. It may be the biggest in our generation. It may be the biggest of our country's life. I challenge you to pick the right person. I'll say this, I've seen behind the curtain. All of us as voters, me included, deserve another alternative. I'm asking you to seriously consider this. I want to be your representative, to serve you and put your needs before my own. My name is David Theus, like the U.S., and I'm asking for your vote on August 18th.
Mr. Rollins?
When Jesus' disciples came to him, they asked him, who is the greatest among you? And his response was, the greatest among you will be like the one who serves. And then he washed their feet. And if you've been in church, you know this or may have heard this story. But servant leadership, I think, is important because in this country today, we have a lot of people who go to D.C. because they want a pin, they want to be a part of a country club, and they think daddy can buy it for them. Or they sink a lot of money into it because they want a hobby. For me, this is about serving. And if you look at my record and my past, it's been one of service. When you're in the classroom teaching seventh graders about the Constitution, you're not meeting big donors who will give to your campaign. When you're in a combat zone, you're not figuring out where the bathroom is in Washington, D.C., but you're serving and leading and defending this great nation. I've served before this, and if you give me the opportunity, I'll continue that service, fighting each and every day to represent you in Washington, D.C., and to represent the greatest nation in the world. And we can keep this great republic that Benjamin Franklin said, a republic, madam, if you can keep it. And I will continue that fight in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Mr. Engelbrecht?
So once again, I want to thank the Republican Liberty Caucus for hosting this event today. So I want to reiterate, everybody that's up here, all the candidates are here. We are all conservative Republicans. We support President Trump. We are staunch defenders of the Second Amendment, and we all want to build the wall as quick as possible. But the main question that you need to ask yourself is, who's going to solve these issues once we get to Washington? Who's going to solve these issues on a daily basis that we face? We have prescription drug prices. We have healthcare premiums. What you need and what you need to look for is somebody that's a problem solver, somebody who can resolve these problems without any issues, but you also need an outside-the-box thinker. I am that candidate. My name is Bill Engelbrecht, and I would appreciate your vote on August 18th. Thank you.
Mr. Mulatto?
Well, thank you for having this and for everybody watching at home. I've told people, in your next representative, if you were to close your eyes and think about the qualities that you would want in this individual, immediately you might be thinking, how tall, colored hair, eyes, whatever. But if I asked you again to rethink about that question, but not about the physical characteristics, but the not so physical, the intangibles, you want them to be dedicated, qualified, and when they say they'll stand alone, they actually will stand alone. If you opened your eyes, I am that candidate. You want somebody that has already been through the trenches, that's somebody exactly like you, somebody who could relate with the silver spoons in the world, who got everything handed to them. If their most important interview was in front of their father, then shoot. There are other choices out here. You don't have to pick the person with the most money, the phantom menace that never even shows up to these things. If they're not going to show up to these things now, they are not going to show up to you, for you, go to bat for you when they get to Washington. Now, somebody like me, again, is dedicated. Somebody is just like you. And this is important because it could be you in 2 years. I want it to be you in 2 years, your children. The whole message of this campaign, they ask me, what are you going to do if you don't succeed? I've already succeeded in what I sought to do. We are inspiring people. If you're feeling these emotions and you want to go up there and you want to run, this is what this is all about. It's to inspire you, because you know what? I'll teach everybody everything that I know. Eventually, good people will get there. I want to see 20 Joe Mulattos in 2022. We strive for competition. The best one of us will get out there. But eventually, if we do it this way, we do what we can now, we teach and mentor the next generation, soon enough, only good people will be in the majority in that U.S. Congress. Go to mulattoforcongress.com and stay in the know with Joe.
Mrs. Wells?
America is the greatest country on earth. and I'm proud to be the daughter of a man who taught me the importance of this country. I'm an experienced professional in jobs and in healthcare for almost 30 years. Actually, more experienced than some of the people are old that are trying to run this race. My supporters are families, business owners, and people that love their community and love their neighbor. I will always be bold. I will not go along to get along. I will not be quiet. We need to send people that are courageous and have learned what it takes to fight and claw for everything that's ever been given to you. Please vote for someone who cares for themselves, cares for you other than themselves. Vote like your life depends on it, because it actually does. I am absolutely tired of career politicians controlling our way of life. In the U.S. House of Representatives, this job is the job of a delegate. That means a person that's a servant representative to the voice of this community. Please vote Amy Pope Wells, because I will always care and I will always serve.
And Mrs. Kamak.
All right, thank you. There's a reason why the Republican Liberty Caucus has endorsed our campaign, and that's because we are the proven conservative in this race, and we can hit the ground running and do this job effectively on day one. I personally believe that our country is slipping into socialism, and if we are going to save our constitutional republic, we need serious and qualified conservatives who are willing to stand up to the establishment and push back against the status quo. I will stand up and fight the squad. I do believe that we need a next generation of conservatives that are willing to take on this fight, that have the energy to take on this fight. As your representative, I will definitely support America First agenda, which includes building the wall, standing with the president, defending life, defending our Second Amendment, cutting taxes, and addressing our national debt and spending. Something that we didn't talk about today is protecting our electoral college. We need to get education back to the states, bring American manufacturing home. And something very personal to me is supporting veterans and first responders. As the wife of a first responder, I'm sick and tired of the attacks on our law enforcement and first responder community. This is personal to me. I also am proud to be supported by Senator Rand Paul, the National Tea Party Express, Tea Party Patriots, Florida Farm Bureau, National Cattlemen's, more than 1,500 firefighters and law enforcement officers in this district, countless local elected officials, and earlier today we watched a forum here on this very stage with candidates running for various offices. It is so important to have someone that knows how to work with state and local elected officials, and I can do that. At the end of the day, your vote is what I am seeking, and I hope that I have earned your vote and your consideration on August 18th for Congressional District 3. Please visit our website, catforcongress.com, to learn more and get in touch with us. And I appreciate everyone tuning in and watching today's forum. It's so important, and thank you to the Republican Liberty Caucus for hosting today's event. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our forum for the Congressional District 3 candidates. Thank you for being here, thank you for professionalism, and thank you for informing the voters on your views. Don't forget the Clay County voters can register and vote in our straw poll on tallyed.com. That's TALLYED.com. And once you register and get logged in, click on the RLC straw poll ballot. Also, early voting for the primary starts in Clay County Thursday, August 6th. Election day is Tuesday, August 18th. On behalf of the Republican Liberty Caucus, thank you for watching and being an informed voter. Remember, be informed and vote. Our country is counting on us. Thank you.